Apologies for the delay. I'd like to go ahead and call this special assembly meeting to order. Let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Ms. Howard. Ms. Howard.
Oh, here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Perez Verdia.
He is excused.
Ms. Solotel.
Here.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Dahl, if you could lead us in the pledge. Thank you. I will go ahead and read the land acknowledgement today. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina. Before we go into audience participation, initial audience participation, and after turn it over to our municipal attorney, Ms. Vogel, to lay the foundation for us to go into executive session, just wanted to share a little bit about what we are doing today for the benefit of the public. So during the regular assembly meeting on August 11th, the assembly accepted information memorandum 114-200, which gave notice of upcoming collective bargaining agreement negotiations with the Anchorage Police Department Employees Association. This AIM set the approximate date of October 1st to begin negotiations. With this date in mind, I made the decision to call this special meeting for the Assembly to give guidance to the administration before entering negotiations. This is in accordance with Municipal Code 3.70.090D, which gives the authority of the Assembly to do so. Most importantly, subsection 2B in that part of Municipal Code prohibits communication to the Assembly concerning negotiations after they have begun, except through periodic and typically very general reporting. In short, this is our only opportunity to give guidance to the administration before they enter negotiations. And given the community conversations regarding policing around the country and within the municipality of Anchorage, I believed it prudent for us to be proactive in giving this guidance. To be transparent to the members and the public, no individual or community organization requested the Assembly or myself to call this meeting. At the Assembly meeting of August 11th, I informed the public and Assembly about this process and asked that members, in an effort to be prepared to give guidance, 1, read the latest APDEA contract, 2, meet with APDEA, and 3, meet with APD command staff. This request was repeated several times over the course of the last month. Thank you to the members who have done this due diligence before today. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on to initial audience participation. Mr. Haberman, welcome. It is not.
Can you hear me real clear?
You should turn it on, though, so it's on the record, please.
Oh, there.
There we go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, you turned it off.
Now
There
is
you
it- Am I there?
You're now. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome. Go ahead.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Metsu Valley. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, a decision made by the governing body is more like the public interest. A resident in Alaska for over 42 years, 20 of which a resident in Anchorage, and known as a self-appointed government watchdog. Now, I'm glad you're having this meeting before you go into negotiations. But I'd like to remind you what I addressed you previously, is that what the City Council in Wasilla does is that before going into negotiations, the council holds a public hearing, at least they have in the past. And the purpose of the public hearing is to show the existing contract of any particular, like the police department and so forth, in negotiations. And then that gives an opportunity for the public to have input before negotiations start. Now, Anchorage is not doing that. What's going on is, I'm glad I had a chance to speak in respectively, but these documents that are in my hands now that were passed to me at 10:01 is not on the website as far as for the meeting. I didn't even have much time because you start the meeting at 10:08 and not enough time to even look at this thing. But the fact is that where's the fair chance for the public to be engaged? We're talking about labor negotiations dealing with the police. And also like to remind you is what's going on around the country is the concerns of how the police departments and police officials throughout our country, there's question of conduct. So one would think that before you go into negotiations, you hold a public hearing, and have that contract, the existing contract for the police or whatever entity you're going to go into negotiations, and give the chance to the public to be engaged and address what they think of that existing contract, whether it needs to be improved this way or that way, salaries or whatever. But there's no chance for the public. And the public's being blind by these papers here explaining certain things, and I appreciate that. But at the last minute before you're going to vote to go in executive session, this is not the way to go. And I'd also like to remind you too, you're talking and dealing with the police and negotiations. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock in the morning. If the people have a job, they're more likely working right now, and hopefully they are working. But this is not the time to bring this matter in such a time frame that there's little no chance for the public to be connected. But they're not even connected, with all due respect, with the necessary documents so that they could say to you what we think, the public thinks. And there needs to also be what we call a comparison analysis of what's going on around the state in contracts dealing with the police and so forth. So you have something to compare with. But we're blind to it, but my time's up respectfully within 3 seconds, and I appreciate this opportunity, and thank you very much.
Thank you for participating. All right, seeing no one else to participate in initial audience participation, Ian, just want to confirm with the clerk, we didn't have anyone sign up to testify over the phone? No. Okay, thank you. The clerk signified no. We're going to move on to items of business. 5A1 on our agenda, collective bargaining agreement negotiations with Anchorage Police Department Employees Association. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Vogel to lay the foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to Anchorage Municipal Code 230036, the Assembly may recess to meet in executive session to discuss labor negotiations with municipal employees. In this instance, the proposal is to meet to discuss the upcoming labor negotiations with the Anchorage Police Department employees. I'm next going to set out the rules for executive session. All information shared and gleaned in this session is confidential. No official action may be taken in executive sessions except to give direction to an attorney or labor negotiator regarding a specific legal matter or pending labor negotiation. The session shall be taped. Tapes will be available to members of the body and authorized staff. and only to those individuals, and may be discussed only in further executive session. The tapes become public at the date specified by the Assembly at the conclusion of the executive session in accordance with code. Relevant to labor negotiations, that's 6 months following the end of the labor contract, so that would be probably about 4 years from now. Any discussion which occurs at this executive session should only be discussed by this body in future executive sessions. Any member who needs to leave during this session may leave, but may only be updated on the discussions after the member's departure in a subsequent executive session or via review of the tapes of this session. Special invitees, employees, and staff members that the body determines are necessary to the conversation may remain in the meeting during executive session. The Ethics Code states that no public servant shall use, disclose, or release confidential or non-public information gained through the person's municipal position unless authorized by law or order of the court. Any violation would be referred to the Board of Ethics. The code provides that the board may make recommendations for corrective action. Past recommended corrective actions have included financial penalties and other professional consequences. Additionally, the municipality may pursue a civil action against an official where the release of confidential information adversely affects the outcome of litigation or negotiations or leads to increased financial liability. Such a disclosure could also subject a member of this body to a recall election. Pursuant to state statute, the grounds for recall include misconduct in office, incompetence, or failure to perform prescribed duties. A violation of municipal confidentiality obligations would meet this criteria. The code does not specifically provide for the collection and destruction of notes taken at executive session, but this has been past municipal practice to assure the confidentiality of discussions in executive session. If you would like me to collect and destroy your notes today, I am happy to. If you elect to take notes and retain them, I remind you that these notes are confidential and that the failure to properly preserve their confidentiality could implicate the same consequences I have set out in this introduction. Okay, now we're on the make a motion stage. So members of the municipality's law department today understand that the Assembly is interested in meeting in executive session to discuss the upcoming labor negotiations with the Anchorage Police Department employees. At this point, it would therefore be appropriate for someone to make a motion from the body to move into executive session to discuss these matters.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Before we vote on this motion, I'd like for the Assembly, like I usually do before these motions, Assembly, Clerk's Office, Administration, including APD, so basically anyone who's going to be in the room when we go upstairs to go into executive session to state their name for the record. So we'll start with the Assembly. We'll start on this end, Chris, and then we'll go around, sorry.
Christopher Constant.
Austin Quinn Davidson.
Felix Rivera.
Barbara Jones.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Pete Peterson.
Jamie Allard.
And then Assembly members on the phone, Forrest Dunbar,
Forrest Dunbar.
Crystal Kennedy,
Crystal Kennedy.
John Whittleton,
John Weddleton.
and then Meg Zalatel.
Meg Zalatel.
And then just confirming, do we have any other Assembly members on the phone? Okay, are there any other Clerk's Office staff who will be joining us in executive session?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the clerk has advised no. Then let's go ahead and go through the administration. We'll start in person and then we'll go on the phone.
Jason Bockenstedt.
Kate Vogel. Additionally, Dee Ennis, the Deputy Municipal Attorney on the civil side, may review the tapes of this, so I wanted to let the body know that.
And I know you're not administration, but go ahead, Dean.
Yes, I'm not. Thank you for recognizing that.
Oh, your mic is off. There.
Is it on now?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for recognizing I'm out of administration. I'm Assembly Councilor Dean Gates, and I will be in the meeting with two sign language interpreters, Gina Ashman and Jamie Hartung.
Thank you. And then, yeah, folks, thanks. It's important to get all this on the tapes.
Justin Dahl, Chief of Police. I'll have with me Deputy Chief Mike Curl and Deputy Chief Ken McCoy.
Assistant Municipal Attorney Blair Christensen.
Raylene Griffith, Labor Relations Director for the MOA.
Courtney Peterson, Office of Management and Budget.
And then, do we have any folks from the administration on the phone?
This is Bill Policy, the municipal manager.
Okay. With that, is there any opposition from the body on the motion to go into executive session?
Chair, can I just have a word?
Oh, sure, Ms. Allard.
If that's okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware, and they probably are, just a reminder that no phones are allowed in executive session.
So I don't know if that's actually the rule. I'd go to Ms. Vogel to clarify that.
I'm not aware of that being a rule. I can certainly see some wisdom in it, but I'm happy to just review the code quickly to see if we can clarify.
Thank you.
Actually, Mr. Gates, maybe you have an answer on that?
I'm not aware of that rule either, and we have in the past had executive sessions with telephone participation from some participants to those executive sessions. So it has been a practice to allow telephone participation.
Sorry, that's not what Ms. Allard was stating, Mr. Gates. What Ms. Allard was stating was actually having our telephonic devices in executive session.
I think what it was,
I'm not aware of that rule either.
And maybe I misunderstood. So go ahead, Ms. Allard.
Maybe I didn't, I'm thinking they can't be on because of recording purposes. I know when I've gone into executive session with the Human Rights Commission, we can't have our telephones on, and we actually have to hand them over.
Okay. Thanks. Well, I guess we'll wait to get advice on that. Mr. Gates, did you have something?
Yes, I think I understand Ms. Allard's concern. It's more related to keeping the executive session meeting confidential. If you have a cell phone that's connected, to someone else not identified in the meeting, that's a breach of the confidentiality. So I think Ms. Allard's sort of alluding to one of the ways that could be enforced or that we can ensure that confidentiality is maintained. And that's just one method of doing so by ensuring, well, collecting cell phones, or perhaps the chair before starting ensuring that everyone has their cell phones turned off, no one is dialed in or connected from outside who's authorized to be in that executive session.
But just to be clear, Mr. Gates, you are suggesting that those are two options, but neither of those are requirements? I'm suggesting confidentiality has to be maintained, and there's a number of methods by which you could ensure that it is. And one of those methods, Mr. Gates, would just be trusting the members not to do anything illegal? Yeah, the honor system is employed often. Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion then, is there any... seeing no opposition to going to executive session, then we are now, I'm gonna go ahead, do I adjourn now, or?
No, we're just gonna recess.
Got it. So we're gonna recess, go upstairs, and then executive session will begin. And folks on the phone, we will call you when we get upstairs.
Thank you.
I think the school district has gone to extreme measures to try to make it safe for some kids to return to school. But one of the problems with this virus is we don't all get sick with it. And some of us can have the infection but not know it, and may pose a risk to people around us. So I think we all have to recognize that wherever we are, there's potential for it to become in contact with the virus. And really, if you're a teacher or work in a school, just like any other workplace with public people coming in, the potential is there that you may unknowingly be exposed to the virus. So it's very important to practice all the safe behaviors, try to keep 6 feet away and wear our face coverings, and do everything we can to try to protect both ourselves and the people we're working with and the kids we're taking care of.
I think it's also important to recognize that when Dr. Bishop and the school district made their announcement yesterday, it is a plan that is in place. It is very much dependent on the community reaching the kind of benchmarks that are necessary so that kids can go back to school. We need to make sure that the case rates come down, that the transmission rates come down. And so we have roughly a month to bring those numbers down. So the more we mask up, the more we maintain physical distancing, the more we avoid high-risk behavior, the greater the likelihood that the school district can do what it set out to do and kids can begin to go back to school. So all of us have the responsibility and the opportunity to help kids go back to school and help the school district achieve its goal of making sure that kids get an in-class education.
Thank you. Next question goes to Paula Dobbin with the Anchorage Daily News. Paula, if you have a question, please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to direct this to Dr. Johnston. Last week she said that she was mildly optimistic that the outbreak amongst the homeless was being contained. And I was just wondering, with the numbers being at 216 right now, how she feels about getting the outbreak under control. And the mayor remarked that, the number of people that actually may be infected are about 10 times higher than the actual reported cases. So are there any projections of how many people within the homeless community actually have the virus?
So I want to make 2 comments. One is that the state section of epidemiology has been doing a great job of hiring some data entry personnel and working on cleaning up some of their data. So part of the increase in that number are some new cases from earlier in the outbreak that have now gotten into the database. So that's a piece of why the numbers have gone up as much as they have. The other thing about the outbreak is that we've been bringing intensive testing to this population through the shelters and associated supportive housing. So I actually feel like the multiplier on undetected cases in the homeless population is much lower than in the rest of the community. So when we use that multiplier of 10, we're going by an estimate that the CDC director gave us a few weeks ago. And I think that is a good estimate for the general population where we don't have nearly the intensive case monitoring. In the homeless population, we are detecting a large number of asymptomatic cases, and we're offering testing on a regular basis, anywhere between a week and every 2 or 3 days, depending on the location and the intensity of the outbreak in that location. So I actually feel like we are detecting the vast majority of the cases as they occur by doing this frequent testing. I do expect that we're going to continue to see sort of a low level continuing probably over weeks and months in the population. But I don't feel like we're missing a lot of the current cases, just that, as we still have people who are susceptible, who haven't had an infection yet, and they're coming in contact with people who have been infected, it is tough to get rid of every case. but I think we're doing a good job of detecting the cases quickly, getting people into isolation, and therefore minimizing the number of new cases that we'll see.
And that's really showing the success of the testing strategy within our shelters and supportive housing with proximity to shelters.
Thank you. Next question goes to Lauren Maxwell with KTUU. Lauren, if you have a question, please go ahead.
I do. This is a question for the mayor, please. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the lottery for small businesses. We've had, my understanding is that's $1 million worth of grants out of a total of about $6 million, was it, for small businesses? We've had some people asking why that amount is so low compared to spending in other areas like for homeless resources.
Well, so there's a number of different pots of money here that we were talking about. There was initially $1 million for small businesses and